Hey, this is V, and I've just finished reading The Nightmare Man by J.H. Markert. This story is a little bit hard to summarize because it's pretty complicated, so I will do my best to touch on enough, to highlight what I thought was interesting. So there are basically two main characters that it follows. First, we have Ben Bookman, who is a best-selling horror writer. For him, the story begins when he publishes his newest book, which is called The Scarecrow. Like when he was writing this book, he was actually dealing with a lot of writer's block, so to handle the problem, he ended up staying for a while at his family's ancestral home, which is called Blackwood. Like it's pretty notoriously like a really creepy place. And he was able to finish the book in record time, but he also doesn't really remember what happened while he was there. And then at the first book signing for this new release, one of the guests at the event actually commits suicide, and he learns that the events that he wrote about in this newest book have begun to come true in real life. And to make things more complicated, like the first assumption, of course, is that someone might be copying his book, like some crazy person using his book as a blueprint for the murders that they commit. But it turns out that the first of these murders actually occurred before the book was officially published. So he becomes a primary suspect in the case. Second, we have the main detective character, who's called Detective Mills. He has a pretty unusual ability, like he can take on other people's bad dreams. So when he comes into like skin contact with someone, like if he shakes their hand or like if their fingers brush or something, he can take away a person's nightmares, and then he will dream like what that person dreamed for a while. Like it's something that he's used off and on, like both to like help people who are having nightmares and also just to learn more about what has been happening in certain people's lives. So he's been dealing with a whole bunch of pretty unusual crimes that happen in their area. Like they've had a really large number of people who end up at an insane asylum after their conviction, which is built on the edge of the Blackwood estate. Like Ben's family, like the Bookmans, actually primarily have been psychologists. Like the first ones to come to the US in the past were really famous for their work with children, especially children who were having nightmares. Like they had a reputation, for being able to help children not have nightmares anymore, and this really earned them like a pretty solid reputation, and also I think was the foundation for a lot of the money that they had. But also they also are kind of a weird family, like they're pretty eccentric and have reputation, I suppose, for being a little bit strange. So in addition to the fact that Ben's book has been coming true in real life, another thing that makes him a primary suspect is actually an event from when he was little. So he has an older sister and a younger brother, but about 13 years ago, his younger brother went missing, and during the investigation of that particular case, Ben was actually also not exactly a primary suspect, but the detective who was also the detective on the current case thought that he was a little bit fishy, like that there was something wrong going on, but there wasn't really any evidence to show that he was connected to the crime in any particular way. So this story moves back and forth between what happened in the past and what happens in the present for a bunch of the characters that it follows, and does a really nice job, I think, of building up that story and like going into everything that happens. Like there's the mystery of this room that both Ben and Detective Mills have been in when they were little, where Ben's grandfather, who's a pretty major character in the background of this story, even though he's passed away, like he took his children before, and Ben remembers that it's a whole book full, or a whole room full of blank books, but it's like a really peculiar room because they were always told as children that they couldn't go in it unless his grandfather let them, and there were like all these rules on how you handle the books even though there's nothing written inside. So there's definitely a lot of weird stuff going around, both around his family and just this place where they live in general. So you get like what the events that happen now are tied with like his family history and this whole background of them, like where they came from, like their practice in psychology, as well as like Detective Mills's general history. So I enjoyed this book. Like, it was really interesting to see where it was going, and I think it tied things together really nicely. Like, the characters were interesting to follow, and like the concepts behind it. It's hard to, I guess, describe much without giving a lot away, but suffice to say, like, it was sufficiently mysterious that I thought it was a really interesting. Like, it talks about like dream catchers and different things related to like superstitions around dreams and nightmares and stuff like that. And I did appreciate the complexity of the mystery. But I guess something I did not like as much would probably just be that there were characters who died that I wish hadn't died. And also, just a heads up that it's pretty gory. Like, it has a lot of serial killers and serial offenders of different kinds, and the crimes they commit are often pretty gruesome. So not as graphically described as they could be, but still pretty bloody. So just a heads up in that regard.